G'day, it's Brett here from BWCflies. In today's session, we're going to tie the Gold Bomber, which is available in a self-tie kit from BCF Townsville. So first of all, thanks very much to the people that have bought the kit so far. And what you get in the kit to tie this fly is a couple of hanks of flash material, one being gold, one being black. You get some structure guards, you get some red eyes for the front of the fly, and you get a spool of 210 denier thread in the black, and you also get 5 Gamakatsu hooks, which will enable you to tie the 5 flies. So the other pieces of equipment that you will need to tie this is you'll need a bobbin holder. You'll need a pair of good quality sharp scissors. A bodkin will be very handy for right at the end. And you will need some UV resin for the head area. Okay. Now these aren't included in the kit. So today I'll be using a thin formula and a thick formula, and also using the torch to set those formulas. That'll be right at the final stage of the fly. Okay, so I've got my Gamakatsu hook in the vise. The hook is nice and horizontal. The first part of the fly that we're going to do is actually to tie in the structure guard. So we're just going to put a base of thread right behind that hook eye, and we can just advance that up to the hook eye and then backwards by about 5 or 6 mils. Cut the little tag end off, and with the guard that you get in the kit, we want to form that into a hoop. Okay, so just marry the 2 butt sections up and form yourself a bit of a hoop like so. And on the underside of the shank, we want to tie that in with about 3 or 4 wraps before we just need to check to make sure that it's in the right position. So when we bend that up, we want that to be touching the hook point only just. So that positioning is pretty good. Once you're happy with that, you can then lock down the base or that flat platform that you've bent into shape. Okay, you can just do that. Give it a good amount of thread just to lock it in, and then we're going to take our thread back to around about the hook point area for this fly, like so. Okay, so you can see where I'm at just there. Yep, check that, that's all good. Now with the gold flash, we're going to take a series of clumps to build the tail section. So with a clump that's about yay sort of size, about the size of a match, we're going to tie that in on top of the shank. Okay, like so. Probably should have put a little bit more on that, to tell you the truth. So we're gonna repeat that one. So we'll take about the same sort of size again. Give it a little bit of a taper. Just like so, just by sliding the fibers between your thumb and forefinger. I'm going to tie that in. Then we'll clip those butt sections off, just like that. Now we're going to work on the underside of the hook shank now, so we need to turn that over in your vise. And then with a clump of gold flash, approximately the same size as what you've used on the top, you want to do, or you want to repeat the same process. So taper it in your thumb and forefinger, push it over the point of the hook. And we're going to tie that in with some nice firm wraps actually. And you should see that material compress down as it gets a nice strong bite into it. You can cover up, you can tidy up those butt sections with your thread if you like. Pull those fibres backwards, and then with your scissors you can just make sure that you've got a bit of a bait fish tapered tail starting to happen. Okay, just like so. So really we're sort of building this fly twice, once at the tail and then once at the head. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. That's going to make a nice tail. You can manipulate this fibre in underneath the thread if you need to as well. So you can push it and pull it around to make sure that you're happy with the tapering and with the positioning of those fibres. It's pretty resilient material that you'll receive inside of the kit. Now what I like to do in the next step is actually cover up all of my black thread, because we're going to be advancing up to this area of the hook shank. So I do like to cover it up with some of the gold flash. Okay, so you can take a little clump that might only be about 10 fibres, tie it in and finish your thread at the start of the tail, and then wrap this over through the middle, just like so. And we want to finish it around about 5 mils, maybe 6 mils from the hook eye. Okay, you can leave that little clump hanging out there if you want to. It's not in the way, and we'll probably actually use it, to tell you the truth. So rather than just chopping it off and putting it in the bin. But over this middle section, we actually want to make this a little bit more durable than just having the flash wound around the hook shank. So at this point, I do coat this with a thin UV resin, like so. Cover up those wrappings. And I actually do push a little bit of resin into the start of that tail section, just like so. Grab the torch. I'm just going to set those resins in place. And what you're doing in this step, you're really you're adding some durability to your fly, so that it'll last a little bit longer. So this is how I tie all my gold bombers. And with this little tuft of material, you can actually fold that straight back over on itself. Then it's not wasted, it becomes part of the top of the bait fish profile, so to speak. And we're now at the head section, and we need to almost repeat that tail section. So take a clump of material off, give it a bit of a taper, and you can position that so that your tapering starts to marry up with the tail taper, and bind it in. Maybe about 3 or 4 turns of thread, and then cut those butt sections. Cut those butt sections out. Same for the underside, and about the same size clump, so about 1/2 to 3/4 of a pencil kind of diameter. Give it a taper in your thumb and forefinger. Pull out any loose stragglers. And tie that in, just like so. a few wraps there. We'll cut all those little butt sections out so they don't get in the way. We're going to cover those up very shortly with the black thread. Okay, we'll do a little bit of that just now. Now we're starting to make a little bit of a bullet shape to the head for the eye to go onto. Now what you will see is that there's a bit of vacant land down the flanks. So we're going to repeat that process again. But what you can do from the long section of your gold flash, you can take a clump that's about, I don't know, about 10 to a dozen fibers, lay it along that flank, fold it back over and tie it down. So you don't need a lot there because you're using the length of the material to create a little bit of bulk on the sides. Okay, and then same on the opposite flank. Take the same size clump, give those fibers a little bit of a taper. Bind them in, fold them directly back over on themselves, bind them in. And you can see I'm only using 2 or 3 red thread wraps for that process, and any that are too long, you can then cut them and trim them. So you're starting to get a taper that runs that way towards the tail along the flanks as well. So you're tapered top and bottom and tapered on the flanks. Okay. Now at this point you can check the profile of your bait fish body to make sure that you're happy with it. If you feel that you need to add a little bit more to the top or the bottom, then you can. So just for the purpose of the demonstration, I'm pretty happy with that, with the shape of that body. But if you thought you're a little bit lean underneath, you can take a small clump, give it the taper like we've done throughout the rest of the process, and then fold it and tie it down like so, and push those fibers over that hook point. And what that's done, that's just added a little bit more depth to the profile of the bait fish. Okay, now to put the black contrasting material over the top. So we want to grab a hank of material that is, let's say, around about a dozen fibers, and we want to use the full length of this material, so don't cut it short. And then give these a little bit of a taper, and we want to position them so they're just a little bit longer than the gold fibers, the longest gold fibers in the tail section. So bind it on over the top, use the length of the fiber, fold it directly back over the top and bind it down. 1, 2, there's 3 there to hold that in position. And with your scissors you can taper the top section just a little bit. Okay, then we're going to finish this head off in preparation for the eyes. Okay, so what we've formed up there is a nice little bullet head of thread. We will whip finish this underneath, just 1 and then 2, like so. And if you like, you can actually take that out of the vise and start to look at the shape. And if it does need a few stragglers trimmed out, then now's a good time to do it. We'll put that back in the vise. We're pretty happy with that. Okay. So with the super glue from your bench kit, so this is an item that's not part of the self-tying kit, but you should have this in your kit. We're going to put a dab on each side of the head, just like so. You can let that soak into those fibers just a tiny little bit. And then we're going to apply the eyes. Okay, so we'll take one and stick it on. Now these eyes are a little bit flexible, so you can actually bend them around that body a little bit as well. They're really nice products that you get inside of your self-tying kit. Okay, then we're just going to pop that on the other side. And before that super glue sets, we want to make sure that they're lined up across the fly and lined up like down each side of the fly as well, so they look really good. Now at this point in time, I would set that aside and then wait for that super glue to cure 100% before I apply the UV resin. Okay, so at this point we're going to switch the fly out. So we're going to set him aside. He's actually going into a kit once I resin the head. And then, in those famous words, here's one I've prepared earlier. So we're at the same stage, ready for the resin. So with a thick formula, I like to fill the top of the eye socket, just like so. And you can make a really nice bullet head shape out of this. Now turn the fly over, squeeze a little bit into that cavity there as well. Just ensuring that you just touch those flash fibers. You can see that I really didn't use a great deal of resin there, and with the torch we can just set that. And being the thick formula, it doesn't run too far either unless you've used too much. Okay, if your resin starts to drip, then you're applying too much resin at a time. This is the way that I tend to explain it. Then with the thin formula, we're going to coat the eye down onto the threads, take it over the thread, and coat the eye. Okay, now we don't want any more than that at this point in time. That's enough resin on there. You can see that it's not dripping. It's just a nice fine coat. We'll make sure that that's nice and set, ready to apply another coat of thin all the way around the head. Okay, so with your thin formula, I actually go behind the eye to capture some of the flash material and let that soak in up over the top to capture some black around the back of the eye, and then apply a little coating all the way around the head, but not too much. You can see that there's barely any coming out, but it's just being managed so that I'm not wasting resin and I don't have resin dripping off the head of this fly. Okay, so just like so. This is where a rotational vise becomes very important. So we'll let that spin around, set that glue as we go, just like so. We should almost be done. feels nice. Okay. Turn the torch off. And at this point, we can just bend our guard so that it's at 90 degrees to the hook shank. And that's pretty much it. That's the gold bomber fly. So if you want to leave the hoop guard on, you can. If you want to turn it into double sprags, then you can cut it in the middle and then just trim it so it's nice and even, just so it just goes past that hook point there. But that's it. That's the gold bomber fly that you can tie from your self-tying kit. That's available at the BCF store in Townsville. Thanks very much for watching. Hopefully you've learnt something from that, and we'll see you next time. Enjoy. Thank you.